2026 is already proven to be an incredible year for survival horror fans, from both a AAA and indie game perspective. Today, however, I want to shed some light on 4 upcoming indie survival horror games that are incredible. This has become a very popular video format on the channel, and I absolutely love making these types of videos. For you today, I played a variety of different upcoming indie survival horror games, from a classic Resi style game set on a submarine to a Silent Hill-esque game that takes place in a castle. There is seriously something here for everyone. All of the links to each game featured will be left down below, so after you watch this video in full, you can check out the ones you like. Without any further delay, let's get into the first game in this video. Blight was a game that was on my radar for a rather long time, actually since its demo dropped all the way back in October of last year. And with the developers following me on Twitter, I almost felt obligated to play it. But honestly, I'm kicking myself I didn't play it sooner. Blight is all about the gameplay and not so much about its narrative, or at least that's how this demo presents itself. The game starts with the main character trying to contact his wife Valeria. With no luck in reaching her, we set off to go find her for ourselves, and this is where we get introduced to this game's hardcore mechanics. Blight wants to be as grounded and realistic in its combat as possible. There is no on-screen HUD at all. All of the game's inventory menus and such are done in this really cool system. If you want to take a look inside of your inventory, you need to physically take your bag off your back and check your items. Doing so leaves you vulnerable, so it's best to do it when you're safe in cover. There is also this belt menu, which is like a hotbar for weapons, and a puzzle item holder, which allows you to check your keys and such on the fly. As for this game's arsenal, we see typical survival horror weapons sprinkled throughout the demo. A starting pistol, a much more powerful shotgun, and even a fast firing submachine gun. Players can also find upgrades for the pistol throughout the demo, and the combat is really fun. Throughout this footage, something you may notice is the lack of an on-screen ammo counter. And like I said earlier, this game is committed to having no HUD elements. If players want to know how much ammo is in their gun, they need to either count their shots as they shoot, or manually take out their magazine and check the ammo. And even then, you don't get an exact number, you kinda just have to eyeball what's in the mag. And I'm an absolute sucker for mechanics like this. However, I actually didn't know that this was an option until after I played through the whole demo. So don't be like me, hold down the R key to check your ammo. Also in line with these realistic combat mechanics is the jamming feature. I only had this happen to me twice throughout my playtime, and one time it actually got bugged out. However, I believe there is a random chance for your gun to jam, preventing you from firing. In order to use that gun again, you need to press spacebar to clear the jam, which leaves you open to attacks. And while it was a rarity, I really am a sucker for this kind of stuff, and I feel like more survival horror games should do it. It adds to the moment-to-moment tension. Having one of your guns unusable in the middle of a fight forces you to make split-second decisions on whether to swap weapons or run away and clear the jam. In addition to the firearms, there is also a kick melee attack, which is mostly just used as a get the fuck off me button. Through this demo, players explore an apartment complex along with its outside environments, and this locale we explore, a Soviet-style apartment block, was a really fun one to explore. The atmosphere mixed with the rain and thunder outside was oddly relaxing and cozy. Going room to room, checking around each corner for enemies was really tense, and it had me playing the game like a Navy SEAL. The puzzles here for a survival horror game were pretty lackluster, if there even was any puzzles. You spent most of your time finding keys or a pair of bolt cutters, your standard survival horror items. However, for a full release, I would want way more puzzle variety to break up its combat, as there is a lot of it. Then onto enemies, and these are a mixed bag. There are your standard zombies, faster zombies, I think anyways, and then these green poison zombies with projectile attacks. And for how standard they were, the game's combat made them fun to fight. Watching enemy body parts fall off as I blasted them with my shotgun, or mowing down a group of enemies with the SMG was so satisfying. Although the enemy's AI could use some work, as they sometimes will get stuck in the environment or just not attack me at all. The game's art style was also pretty nice, and even though it's not super scary in appearance, there were some generally scary moments in this game that got me once or twice. Another point I wanted to bring up was the level design, as it felt like there was a lot of wasted space. Whole rooms would be dedicated to either one item or none. It made exploring feel a little redundant and repetitive after a while. So I would have liked to see more of a reason to explore every nook and cranny like so many of us do in these games. Finally, I did encounter some bugs and a few stutters throughout. However, for its roughly 45-minute runtime, this is a really promising game. I don't think it's going to change the survival horror genre or anything, but it is a really fun, solid survival horror game that I definitely recommend you check out. It is currently slated for release sometime in March. However, its demo is available right now over on Steam. Psycho Dead is a Resident Evil inspired survival horror game that introduces telekinetic powers into the standard survival horror formula. It's a game that has a lot of ambition behind it, and it feels almost AA in its quality. Getting into it, Psycho Dead presents a very familiar narrative. The game takes place in a research center, where a huge company known as Atlas Group are experimenting on people and animals in order to create bioweapons. Now, where have I heard that before? Aside from its clear Resident Evil inspiration, I enjoyed its story setup, although it has been done before. Where Psycho Dead differs from the classics of this genre is in its gameplay. We play as Alexia, a young girl who has gone under harsh experiments at the hands of this company, which grants her telekinetic abilities. People in this world who possess these powers are known as psychos. Their hair is a pale white and their eyes a dark crimson. These psychos can use multiple telekinetic abilities. One of the abilities I could use through this demo was the grab and pull ability, allowing me to move objects in the environment or throw them around. This has a few uses. You can throw any old piece of furniture at enemies in order to stun them, or if you find a red barrel, you can launch it at an enemy, blowing them to pieces. This ability is also used in some environmental puzzles, which I was a big fan of. Then we get a shock shot ability. Alexia makes the shape of a gun with her finger, and after allowing some time to charge up, you can unleash a devastating amount of force, acting as another method of combat. She also has a shield ability, allowing her to prevent any oncoming damage, along with a crush power, making whatever we want crumple into pieces. However, in true survival horror fashion, this isn't unlimited. Alexia has a small meter bar, which depletes while using your abilities. The only way to fully replenish this is by finding consumable items around the environments. There is also firearm combat here. I found your typical guns throughout the demo, a standard pistol along with a shotgun. However, I will point out, I broke the game slightly while obtaining the shotgun. You can come across a safe which contains the shotgun and other items. Now normally, you would just go out and search for its code and unlock it. However, if you use Alexia's pull ability, you can break the game and grab all of the items straight through the safe without needing the code, which I imagine was not an intended feature. The combat as a whole was also pretty good. Firearm combat felt crunchy and heavy, however enemies felt like bullet sponges at times, although having a mix of both firearms and your powers makes for a lot of fun gameplay moments. You get a lot of freedom in how you engage enemies. You can do combos of gun and telekinetic attacks. Outside of combat, here you will find your average survival horror progression. Explore the environment looking for keys, turn on power for certain areas, find a keycard to gain further access to the building, and so on. What you would expect from this genre. As for its environment, the laboratory we explore was a well done rendition of a genre staple. Its many shades of white, grey and black give it this sterile look, which I always find unnerving to explore. However, it's nothing revolutionary. Many others online have pointed out that this game takes heavy inspiration from Galarians, a PlayStation 1 cult classic. While I'm still yet to play that game for myself, I can see its inspiration here. There is also some other classic survival horror elements featured here. Alexia has a brutal limited inventory. Not only are consumables held in your lowly 5 slots, but also key items. At a point in this game, my 5 slots were filled with 3 key items, so you'll be making a lot of trips back to the safe room. I did mention that Psycho Dead is a very ambitious title, and while that's a great thing, it also means the devs sometimes aimed a little higher for what they could achieve. Now, I will always take everything in these videos with a grain of salt, as these are demos and not the full release, but I did find in this game that there was some performance issues. Twice during my playtime, my FPS randomly dropped to sub 30 for no apparent reason. Stopping and starting my recording in OBS seemed to fix this, but it was an odd bug to happen. Enemy AI was also rather clunky, and I found myself not really threatened by most enemies. The voice work and acting here was kinda cheesy to say the least. Now this could very well be the devs' intention, chasing the likes of old RE game voice acting, but it does seem like the devs intend on having a much deeper and serious narrative here. And I wasn't really hooked into the story initially, despite liking its setup. However, shortly into playing, we get introduced to the Ripper, a Nemesis-esque brute. This creature design is fucking badass. Not only is its sheer size intimidating, but it gets its name from the chainsaw device attached to its arm. Not only do we see this beast in action, but late into the demo, it pursues us, which was the scariest moment in the demo for me. Secondly, like I said, the game's story didn't really hook me. However, after we get out of the game's introductory area, we are faced with this horrifying yet beautiful image. We see a gigantic female torso. It's strung up and hung on display. It has this grotesque growth of eyes on its face, and it seems to be a psycho just like Alexia. This creature even reacts to your gunshots if you shoot it. This has me so intrigued as to what this even means, and honestly, it's exactly as I put it. Horrifying yet beautiful. When this game gets going and you're exploring the environment, taking on enemies, solving puzzles, and finding items, it's great survival horror fun mixed with some fresh ideas. However, its introductory area really hindered this demo, as it was a bit of a slog. Once out of that area, the game becomes a lot more fun though. I am very eager to see more from Psycho Dead. Its narrative did by the end of the demo have my attention. Its gameplay, while needing some kinks ironed out, was pretty fun, and its telekinetic abilities makes this a very unique game for the genre. I really hope there is a lot of uses for these in the full game. The devs, in my opinion, should really lean into these powers, as they were a highlight here. This game's demo will run you about 55 minutes or less of your time, and it's slated for release sometime this year. Psycho Dead introduces enough new and interesting ideas on top of genre staples to make it a unique game you should keep on your radar. Now we have a game that really knocked me for a loop. BECROWNED is a classic style survival horror game. It feels mostly inspired by the early Team Silent Hill games. It has a very similar inventory system, combat gameplay, and even its camera style all feel very alike Silent Hill 2 or 3. However, BECROWNED has some incredible atmosphere and environments to pair with its gameplay. Upon starting this game, the first 15 minutes or so, we explore an empty campsite, seemingly set out in the wilderness in America. And oddly enough, it felt cozy and nostalgic in a way, which is strange as I haven't personally ever experienced any environment like that. The subtle tension building in the intro as we explore more and more of the empty campsite and realise something is going on here is very well done. The general story setup here is that the main character Richard is looking for his wife Vicky, who has mysteriously vanished. However, this story felt rather similar to Silent Hill 2 in some of its moments. There seems to be skeletons in Richard's closet. His past is currently unknown to the player, but it's clear something bad happened in it. We also, towards the end of the demo, meet a woman named Victoria, who is oddly similar in both name and I presume appearance to Richard's wife Vicky. See the Silent Hill 2 similarities here? This game completely surprised me once we fully got into it and left the sunset lit campsite behind. Richard is brought into this nightmare otherworld that seems to be from the medieval era. We can explore an old church building and even a huge castle. Along the way, we meet odd and quirky characters from that time. And exploring the castle, it felt rather similar to something straight out of Dark Souls or Elden Ring in a really good way. Richard, being a normal guy from present day, interacting with these almost folktale characters and environments was really intriguing, and I honestly wanted to keep on exploring more of these areas, as it straight up felt to me like a Silent Hill game set in the medieval era. Now, we don't only explore these areas. Some more contemporary environments are featured here, such as a gas station and office building. And while this could maybe feel awkward and confused, having conflicting environments in this game, it feels really well implemented here. The modern day areas seen here, Richard's office and the gas station, are the odd ones out, including Richard. He's like a fish out of water here. He has been brought to this medieval otherworld, and along with him, some present day environments came too. I really hope the full game gets this mix of old world and modern day areas right, because it was a really interesting idea explored in this demo. Now, not only are these environments gorgeous to look at, but both the atmosphere and soundtrack are great. The heavy rainstorm that separates each area gave me such a sense of dread, and there were some rather unnerving moments I won't spoil. The contrast with that, the game's opening and campsite section was so warm and cozy. However, it begins to unravel and fall apart as you explore it more. I more so expected the initial campsite area to be what the game was like, just throw in some monsters and weapons and we're set. However, what the developers did with the medieval environments has me wanting to see much more, especially with the demo's ending story moment, which I won't get into. Now, enough about the story and gushing over its locales. How is the gameplay? Well, it's mostly good. Enemies look creepy and sickly. I love the humanoid enemy design. And while melee combat and tank control games isn't usually great, it's pretty alright here once you get the hang of it. Enemy AI was also a little finicky and frustrating. However, that would probably be my only complaint. Other than that, it's typical survival horror fun, filled with tight resource management, limited means of combat, puzzle items, and all the rest. BECROWNED has quickly shot up on my list of most anticipated indie games. The demo is available on Steam right now, although there is currently no release date or year. However, I still suggest you check this game out if you like what I've described. Heavy Metal Death Can is what you would get if you took classic Resident Evil and put it in a submarine full of the undead underwater. The game's main location is very unique for this genre. It takes place in a Swedish submarine during the Cold War, which from the get-go had my attention. This game takes heavy design cues from classic Resident Evil. However, it feels most inspired by RE1 Remake due to the lighting and overall aesthetics of its environments. It just has this RE Remake look to it all, which I'm a big fan of. I love how this game featured all of my favourite classic survival horror elements: fixed camera angles, limited inventory space, tank controls, and even limited saves, although there was a big issue with that I'll get into later on. The story setup for Heavy Metal Death Can is pretty simple. You're on a submarine deep underwater that has been infected with some nasty virus. All of the crew on board have become hungry for your flesh, and it's up to you to figure out what's going on with the ship and its crew. And there is also some great environmental storytelling with the notes hidden around the place. And like I mentioned, we get some sweet classic RE style gameplay. Through the demo, I found a pistol, flare gun, melee weapons, and limited resources, one of which was a snus health item, which I found pretty funny, along with finding your typical keys and puzzle items. The atmosphere here is very oppressive in a great way. It felt like just the right atmosphere for a submerged submarine. You get this unique, claustrophobic sinking feeling, realizing there is no way out of here and they are stuck with these grotesque monsters that you once called your crewmates. The game's music overall was pretty great, with some nice grungy tracks which contrasted nicely with the game's other beautiful somber melodies. However, I had some major issues with the game's gameplay as a whole. To start, the enemies are extremely fast, and a lot of them are placed close together in tight spaces. They all also seem to require the same amount of shots to kill, with no variation. From my own gameplay, all enemies seem to die after 5 shots, with no variation. And with no variation, this becomes really boring. If you have 5 bullets, you know you can kill 1 enemy. It completely removes all tension from the combat, since you know if you have X amount of bullets, you can kill X amount of enemies. Adding some random variation to enemy health, let's say between 3 and 6 shots to kill an enemy, would do wonders for this game's combat. And while overall that's not a deal breaker, not only are the enemies frustrating to fight, but the save function in this game was unusable. I did mention this game borrows the limited save system seen in something like RE1 Remake. However, in this demo, I did not find the item required to save once, meaning every time I died, I would have to start from the very beginning, which happened to me a fair few times. And I'm willing to admit fault and take that back if there was the needed item somewhere on the ship, and maybe I missed it. However, I searched high and low and went through every environment and never came across it, which had me extremely frustrated. And finally, to top it all off, the final puzzle of the demo was rather unclear, confused, and aggravating. Players need to open the door to the ship's reactor. The door is locked via a numbered keypad. The only way to find our answer is to translate a sequence of Morse code beeps, which even when using many Morse code translators and the in-game translation sheet, I could not for the life of me figure this one out. This demo roughly takes 30 to 40 minutes to complete. My recording time was an hour and a half long. That's how stuck I was. And hey, again, this could be user error. However, the Morse code felt so hard to read and decode, along with the in-game translation sheet being very confusing. This puzzle, the lack of a save function, and the frustrating enemy AI and placement overall really soured this game for me. I adore the game's concept, its atmosphere, its environments, and its soundtrack. It's all super unique and fresh. However, great looking environments can only go so far when the game is annoying to play. I feel like some big adjustments to the enemy's code and placement are in order. Also maybe toning down how frequent they can grab you or reducing their movement speed could help here. The Morse code puzzle also needs heavy adjustment. I think it should still remain a Morse code puzzle, as that's a great fit for a game set on a submarine. However, aside from it all, and pushing past my gameplay frustrations, this game has classic survival horror gameplay, great atmosphere, a unique setting, and an intriguing end to the demo, which has me wondering where the story will go. I would love to come back to this game for its launch and see a fully fleshed out submarine along with some major gameplay improvements. Heavy Metal Death Can launches on the 28th of May of this year, and you can't actually, as I'm writing, play this demo. The public demo goes live February 16th. I, however, got an early access key thanks to my good buddy survivalhorrors.com. A big thank you to him for hooking me up, and links to his website will be left below. Depending on when you see this, you may be able to check out the demo for yourself, and I actually do recommend you go check this game out. Hopefully some of my complaints can be addressed for the demo and full release. Its environments and unique setup make it more than worth playing for fans of classic survival horror games, although be warned of the gameplay issues I mentioned. And thus, another list of upcoming indie survival horror games comes to a close. I feel like this video had a great variety of games for all sorts of different people. From Blight's first person combat to the fixed camera angles and claustrophobic environments seen in Heavy Metal Death Can, there is a great amount of variety here, and if either of those don't do it for you, the telekinetic abilities in Psycho Dead or medieval environments of BECROWNED should do the trick. If I had to pick my favourite game on this list, it's honestly hard to say one game in particular. I'd say Blight had my favourite gameplay of all, but it's hard to deny how amazing BECROWNED's environments are. And even the intriguing story Psycho Dead was setting up has me just as interested. So honestly, I like all of these games on this list. I absolutely love making these kinds of videos, So if there is an upcoming indie survival horror game you want to be featured in one of my videos, leave a comment below and let me know what game that is, and who knows, it may feature in the next one. I do have my eye on a few upcoming survival horror games that I'm awaiting a demo release, so it may be a little while until I'm able to make another one of these. But I hope if you did enjoy this video, you will consider subscribing to the channel. It's free, it helps me out a ton, and it lets me know you guys like these kind of videos. Let me know down below what your favorite game from today's video was and why. And with that, I'll end this video here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will hopefully see you in my next one. Peace. A quick little side note, since starting production on this video, Blight has gotten a new demo, which addressed a lot of my problems and issues I had with it. Not only did it add a new weapon, melee combat, and puzzle mechanics, but it also introduced some more narrative elements. So that new demo will be linked down below.